Hi, Right Riders. Cruz here. Thank you so much for joining me. In this video, we are going to be beginning the Oxford Test of English Writing Module Part 2. If you noticed a previous video, you will see that I had completed the Part 1 of the writing module. So I'm heading in that direction right now. Please keep in mind, Right Riders, that this is a demo lesson. And so it's just, again, a demonstration. Now I can change what's the background looks like. So I'm going to go a little bit darker today. This is sort of the lighter background, and I'm going to hit the darker background. And now I'm going to choose writing part 2. And notice, right, writers, if you don't make a choice, it's going to go ahead and kick you into the writing portion right away. So in the previous video, I had created a review in 25 minutes and I chose the option on the right. However, in this video, we're going to be writing an essay in 25 minutes. Notice here, right writers, how a timer has begun and it basically gives you 2 minutes to make a decision on which prompt you would like to choose. So otherwise, the computer chooses for you. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the essay. Please keep in mind, right, writers, I am going to write two separate essays on this one, and you'll understand why based on the question that you see here. And it says that I have 25 minutes to write an essay. The timer has already started, right, writers? And you see that it's asking me to talk about the health you've been talking about health rather in your English class. Your teacher has asked you to write an essay, and the title of the essay is Should Shops Be Allowed to Sell Food That Is Bad for Your Health? In the previous video, again, when I had written the review, I definitely saw, sort of a glimpse of this option, and this is a persuasive essay. So we've got to make a decision, meaning, do we feel that shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health, or do we believe that shops should not be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health? And that is why, right, writers, you will actually see two videos on writing part 2, because in one video, I'm going to focus on why shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. And then in the next video, I will write a persuasive essay on why shops should not be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. So, with that said, right, writers, I want you to keep in mind that we definitely want to make sure that we have an introduction, we want to make sure that we have a body paragraph, and we want to make sure that we have a conclusion. So that is definitely important in structuring this essay because really that's what makes an essay an essay. Also, we want to keep in mind that this is a persuasive essay and that we must take a position. And we should write this essay within 100 to 160 words. Now, if you scroll down, right, writers, it actually gives us sort of the word count on how many words we have. And so we can sort of keep track from there. So, with that in mind, I argue that I have more than 3 words, but it's interesting because obviously I hyphenated those words. And that is something that I did not realize how it tabulated with those hyphens there. So that's a new one for me. With 22 minutes remaining, right, writers, let's think about this question. Should shops be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health? I'm going to argue first, yes, that shops should be allowed to sell food. And so that's going to be my thesis. That will be my last sentence in my introduction. So let me go ahead and type that now. So I can say something like, therefore, I believe that shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. Now, what I want to do is write some sentences before the end of this introduction explaining why shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. And granted, yes, we've been talking about health in our English class, but I'm also thinking about it from a, you know, a capitalist or consumerist, the consumerism that we have in our society. We do live in a consumeristic society. We engage in consumerism. That's part of how the capital system works, or capitalist system. And so, again, if we truly believe in freedom of choice and this idea of living in a capitalist consumeristic society, then shops should be allowed to sell any type of food, um, really, and that we have to make decisions on, whether or not we purchase. So, thinking about how I'm going to start this, I always like to start Right Writers with some imagery and putting us in that situation of, walking down the aisles and in a grocery store or in a store and wanting something sweet, um and maybe not having that as an option. So I'm going to sort of set that up first, right, writers. So, um let's start with imagine. So I have, imagine you are walking through. I'm going to go ahead and take this out, right, writers. Imagine you are walking through your neighborhood grocery store on an early Saturday morning. Okay, so, right, writers, here's what I have so far. Imagine you are walking through your neighborhood grocery store on an early Saturday morning. You are preparing a large breakfast for your relatives, or we could say for your family, and you need sugar for the pastries you wish to bake. However, as you walk through the aisles, you cannot seem to find what you need. When you ask the clerk to help you find sugar, He tells you that they no longer sell the staple. When you ask the clerk to help you find sugar, he tells you that they no longer sell the staple because it is unhealthy. Okay, right, writers, with 14 minutes remaining, the introduction is always the longest one for me. And I need to really look at my word count. I'm already at 107. So I may break this up into an intro and a conclusion. Imagine you are walking through your neighborhood grocery store on an early Saturday morning. You are preparing a large breakfast for your relatives, and you need sugar for the pastries you wish to bake. However, as you walk through the aisles, you cannot seem to find what you need. When you ask the clerk to help you find sugar, he tells you that they no longer sell the staple because it is unhealthy. Do you wish to live in a world where you cannot even purchase sugar? That is exactly why I believe that shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. So, okay, I'm going to take this part out, right, writers, and move this down, the breakfast part. Okay, and see if that is still okay. Imagine you are walking through your neighborhood grocery store on an early Saturday morning. However, as you walk through the aisles, you cannot seem to find what you need. When you ask the clerk to help you find sugar, he tells you that they no longer sell the staple because it is unhealthy. Do you wish to live in a world where you cannot even purchase sugar? That is exactly why I believe that shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. 11 minutes remaining, right, writers? And boy, I am struggling with that. I have to write it in 160 words. That's really what I'm worried about, right, writers. Um, so I'm thinking about the ending. You are preparing a large breakfast for your relatives and you need sugar for the pastries you wish to bake. Um, Imagine you need sugar for the pastries you wish to bake for the breakfast pastries you wish to bake. However, you are barred because shops cannot sell food that is bad for your health. Okay, making my conclusion here, right, writers? Okay, however, you cannot make the delicious sweets because shops cannot sell food that is bad for your health. What an awful world that would be. Okay, so I've got some opinion in here, and now with 8 minutes remaining, right, writers, I need to come up with 34 words pretty much in the middle for my body paragraph. So with 8 minutes remaining, not doing too poorly here. I just am trying to think of um, this idea of, shops being able to sell food, should be allowed to sell food. That is why I believe that shops should be allowed to sell. And in fact, I'm going to take out that is bad for your health. I'm just going to say something like should be allowed to sell food. I'm just going to keep it as is, right, writers? I was going to try to say something different, but I am running out of time and I really need to come up with something in the body paragraph. That is exactly why I believe that shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. It just sounds terrible. Like we should be allowed to eat sugar. It's bad for you. We know that. Um, let's see. That is exactly why I believe shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. Um, boycotting sugar. Boy, I am struggling, right, writers, with this body paragraph. Um, Let me go back to the shop owners. Shops have enough to worry about, such as their inventory and their profits. Asking them to serve as a health and wellness coach is preposterous. Shops are there to serve us, not shops are there to serve us. Okay, so I have shops have enough to worry about, such as their inventory and their profits. Such as their inventory and profits. Have enough to worry about, such as inventory and profits. Asking them to serve as asking owners to serve as our health and wellness coaches is preposterous. Shops are there to serve us. They are not there to decide what their customers should and should not buy. Cater to our needs. They are not there to decide what we should and should not buy. And I need to take out a couple of words here, right, writers, 6 to be exact. So, I don't, and I don't even need to think it needs to be in the morning. Imagine you are walking through your neighborhood grocery store. However, as you walk through the aisles, you cannot find what you need. Perfect. I'm at 159, right, riders. So I'm going to go ahead and take it from the top. Imagine you are walking through your neighborhood grocery store. However, as you walk through the aisles, you cannot find what you need. When you ask the clerk to help you find sugar, he tells you that they no longer sell the staple because it is unhealthy. Do you wish to live in a world where you cannot even purchase sugar? That is exactly why I believe that shops should be allowed to sell food that is bad for your health. Shops have enough to worry about, such as inventory and profits. Asking owners to serve as our health and wellness coaches is preposterous. Shop owners cater to our needs. They are not there to decide what we should and should not buy. Imagine you need sugar for the breakfast pastries you wish to bake. However, you cannot make the delicious sweets because shops cannot sell food that is bad for you. And right, riders, I was cut off. You saw my struggle. Basically, like, I think my biggest struggle was the time constraints. Not the time constraints, but the amount of words that I can use. So I was limited to an essay in 160 words. And again, for me, an essay typically will have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. Now, one could argue, well, you can just make one large paragraph. However, I just wanted to make sure that I wrote it in the best possible way that I could. And for me, I prefer having the intro, the body, and the conclusion separate. And that for me lets the test grader know that, yes, I understand this is an essay and I understand the format in which this should be written. Um, as far as the what I call the IBC, the introduction, body, conclusion. So, right, writers, I hope I started to feel a little bit stressed, right, writers. So I hope that my experience rubbed off on you a little bit, and you can sort of see me sweat a little bit at the end and just sort of scrambling. So, with that said, right, writers, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope these videos ensure your success in writing and taking these incessant tests to prove that you are worthy. Sometimes I just, I understand the importance of demonstrating your ability to communicate in English, but sometimes I feel like these tests can be preposterous at times, and just how many times do we feel like we need to prove ourselves and then prove ourselves again and then prove ourselves again? So, unfortunately, that is the society, the world we live in. And right, writers, I commend you for fighting the fight and moving forward every step of the way. Thank you again, right, writers. Love you guys. I appreciate you subscribing to this channel. I will see you again soon next week. In the next video, I will talk about why shop owners should not be allowed to sell food that is bad for us or unhealthy for us. Thanks again, right, riders. Take care. Cruise out. Bye bye.